right, welcome. This is the Something Venture podcast. I am Kent Lindstrom. I am your host. My guest today, Sarah Marie Jackson. Did I say that right?
You said it right, but
All
I
right.
go with the alias of Sarah Marie.
You do? Mm-hmm. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is cool.
All right.
But I like it more because then people don't associate me as someone who's just married.
Nobody knows that.
Yeah, but...
If you say Sarah Marie Jackson, people just go, that's like some pretentious, like, Lisa Marie Presley. Nobody knows you're married because of it.
Yeah, but if
I'm
you
respecting the Sarah Marie. Like, I'm totally down with you. I'm just, I don't think it's as negative the other ways.
It isn't until you realize that I work with my husband.
Oh, yeah, right.
As soon as people make that connection...
See, still the
then
name's
it's-
Jackson, though. So people are like, oh, it's two Jacksons. Like, everyone's named Jackson. It's not like your husband had some weird name.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do this thing.
Okay.
All right. So in this podcast, I explore the reality behind the Silicon Valley headlines as I sit down with the people who are shaping the way we view the world online and beyond. And you were doing that. So are you the CEO?
CEO? No, I'm not the CEO.
God.
Probably like the COO.
You're like the founder, probably CEO, definitely COO
Yeah.
of the Spec Podcast Network.
Yeah.
So you run a successful company. You've previously founded a company, and you kind of came to Silicon Valley from nowhere. Is that right?
From very much nowhere. From a little town in Minnesota that is known for having the world's largest hand-spun twine ball.
Right.
So, yes.
Is there a twine ball that's done by machine
Apparently
that's
there is.
disqualified from your
Apparently
hometown?
there is, yeah. I don't know where it is, but they had to make that distinction in the plaque that they have.
Wow.
Yeah, right over it. It was
That's cool.
pretty
I got to tell you,
amazing.
one of my favorite... I'm kind of making fun of you, but not really. Like, Mankato is where you're from? Or did you went to school?
I'm actually originally from Darwin, Minnesota, but I went to school in Mankato, yeah.
Okay, so I went to Northwestern, which no one here knows where Northwestern's from, where Northwestern is. At Northwestern, though, when people are saying nowhere, they say, like, Mankato. Like, if somebody's, like, from some really random school, that's how I know what that school is.
Yes. Most people, when I describe Mankato, I say, have you ever seen Juno, the movie Juno?
Yeah.
There's a reference to Mankato in the movie where the couple that's arguing during their science experiment is talking about having too much snow peach boons at a party in Mankato.
Yep.
I was like, that's Mankato.
So it's actually nowhere. And I don't mean that to be offensive at all. We're just like getting this thing set up a little bit.
Totally.
And you run a podcast network too, which is somewhat intimidating because, you can judge my operation here.
No judgment at all. I like the scrappiness.
Nice.
We're really scrappy too. So having like a setup where you can fit it into one backpack is
Yep.
the best.
And no editing.
And no editing.
I could sit here and not talk for like 15 seconds and I would not go back and cut it out.
That's amazing.
We can try it if you want.
Should we try it?
You probably couldn't do it.
With my stuff?
No, I mean, you probably just couldn't sit here for 15 seconds and not say, like one of us would jump in. But I'm just saying, for the record, I could do it and I wouldn't go back and edit it. It wouldn't bother me at all. So tell me about your path to Silicon Valley. I mean, how do you start in Mankato, in Minnesota, and like find Silicon? Like, how does that call to you? Like, how does that come about?
Yeah, it was all just a happy one thing after another, like happy circumstance. And I think it's partially, it's a little bit of work. It's a lot of hard work and a little bit of luck. And just being in the right place at the right time. But my husband and I worked in a company in Mankato and started our own business.
Was this the string company that made the string for the ball? Was it the mascot of the town? Is that what happened?
It was even worse. It was a paper company, not unlike Dunder Mifflin, but it was for wedding invitations.
Wow, that's a thing.
Yes, it's a big thing, and I will never go back into a wedding, and I'm okay with that. But we both hated our jobs, so we started this side business.
Is that when you got married? You were inspired by all the cards, and you're like, "Hey, we should get married."
And we got a huge discount on all of the wedding things.
Let's put this behind us. Like,
so it's now or never.
Yeah.
Because we can get 50% off these stupid invitations.
Right.
Yeah. So we worked at this company for for like a blip in time, hated it, started our own company called Pixel Fox, and it was a digital agency where we helped people redesign their websites.
Right. Now, why did you think you could start a company? Like, that's not that easy a thing to do. Like, most people in most places in the world, well, I guess people start dry cleaning, but most people don't go, we're going to start our own company. That's something.
Yeah, I think it was just dumb luck.
Fair enough.
Like, well, anybody can do this. We might as well do it too. And I think it was just maybe a little bit of ignorance too, not knowing what it took to keep a company running.
Yeah, a lot of entrepreneurs say that actually.
Hence,
like, no way I would have done this now that I've done it. Yeah.
Just woke up one day and said, we could totally do this, and did it, and it failed, and it was a wreck, but
again,
learned a lot.
Most entrepreneurs fail and learn a lot.
Yep.
So
learned a lot.
Right on track.
Won't go back, but we'll go forward from there. So that shut down. Got this opportunity in San Francisco during a conference. My husband went to a conference, and somebody found him and said, do you want a job? And it was this classic startup event where he just got asked to be a junior designer. We moved with like a dog and a small U-Haul.
Yep.
Drove across the country.
You're like the thing.
Yeah.
You're like the guy with the wagon thing.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, Oregon Trail.
Yeah,
like,
and the dog.
We just needed to shoot some squirrels to eat, and we were going to be fine. And hopefully not get dysentery.
Like, what did you see along the way? Did you see anything like... Because there's those crazy things out in the middle of the country. Like, there's the Devil's Tower. Like, what the hell is that? That's crazy.
I don't know. I was probably asleep.
There's a whole corn thing.
There's a whole
corn palace out. There's like stuff
That's
out there.
That's in South Dakota, in Mitchell, South Dakota.
Oh, yeah, right. Like, anyone who listens to this podcast know that there's like 2 Dakotas, much less a South one. But yes, that's in South Dakota.
Crazy. No, I didn't see anything weird. I think the weirdest thing was driving through Utah because we had this like U-Haul.
Yeah.
And luckily I got to drive the car, but he had to drive the U-Haul. And we were going through these mountains.
Yeah.
And that was insane.
Yeah.
Because they're so tight and the roads are so close to the edge.
Yeah.
And there's no guardrail.
Yep.
So we could have tipped over at any minute.
Yeah.
But somehow we survived
and
an hour of this. And I was just like sweating profusely because I was so nervous. But yeah, we made it out here. We stayed at a terrible hotel for 3 nights called the Cartwright Hotel. It's right off of Union Square, but it's like,
you read the map wrong.
Right, it's right on that edge of like where it gets super sketch if you go on the left side of the street, but if you stay on the right, you're fine.
Yeah.
Stayed there for 3 nights.
Wow.
And then
long stay.
Could not do it on the 3rd night because we woke up in the middle of the night and our lights were on.
Wow.
So that was weird.
Did you leave them on, or did somebody like...
I have no idea.
Wow.
So we decided we were just going to get out of there. So we found this Airbnb in Noe Valley with this guy who's amazing. His name's AJ. Shout out to AJ.
Yeah.
He works at Google, but he's a cool dude. Stayed with him for 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks he said, you two are amazing and love your dog. You should just stay here.
That's awesome.
You just stay here. So we decided to stay at his place for 2 years. So a 2-week Airbnb turned into 2 years. And we had like all of our stuff crammed into this one room downstairs, shared a bathroom, shared like living space, the whole thing. But just got going, And
what did you think of this, like San Francisco? I'm acting like you're just a hayseed from nowhere. It's kind of ridiculous, but you know what I mean. Like you came here from where you're like, wow, this is really cool, or this place is kind of gross, or like what was your...
It was gross. I didn't like it at all, especially being right by Union Square.
Yeah.
I thought it was disgusting.
So you didn't have like, oh my God, that's the Golden Gate Bridge I always dreamed of thing?
No, because we didn't see the Golden Gate for like the first 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
Once I got to that side of the city, I was okay with it.
So you didn't grow up like dreaming of moving to San Francisco or anything like that?
Never. So
what's funny about what's great about the story is that the classic person who I talked to went to some version of like Harvard or Yale, and then there's a few Princeton outliers. And then they worked for McKinsey or Goldman, like that kind of diversity, right? And then they kind of moved out here to go work for like Facebook or Twitter, or whatever they went to work for. Mm-hmm. And you actually did the wagon train thing where you just hopped in your car and you like came out to make it happen.
Yeah.
Which is a great story.
Yeah, it was terrifying. I was terrified. My family hated me because
Why'd your family hate you?
Well, they expected me to stay home. They expected me to stay really close, and they also expected me to pump out probably 4 or 5 kids by now too.
Oh, right.
So
yeah, disappointment.
Yeah, so big disappointment. But it was, I mean, you can't pass it up. If you get the opportunity to go somewhere, you have to see if you can.
Right.
So drove out, did that whole thing. I hated it at first. Couldn't find a job. Had a really hard time finding a job.
Did you ever think of just going back?
I did. I probably did for the first 9 months.
Right. You're homesick.
Yeah, thinking I don't belong here. This
Right.
is not my jam. These are not my people.
Yeah.
But after 9 months, I got into a groove. I finally got a job at a bakery of all places.
Yeah.
Because nobody else would hire me.
You know what story you're telling? Like, this is exactly like? Well, kind of like, and maybe not that much like. You're like a 1940s movie star.
1940s?
20s?
No.
No, I mean, you're old. I mean, not like, the story used to be that people were like living in a small farm in Kansas.
Oh,
and they just came out here, and they just took a job, like somewhere, like at a coffee shop, and they get discovered and they become like a movie star.
Well, I was never discovered.
I know.
But
I didn't say it was a perfect analogy. It obviously broke down there. But you came out here, got a job at a bakery.
Yeah, I got a job at a bakery, which was, I learned a lot, didn't like it, was there for 5 months. I loved the people, but
Sounds
I just
horrible.
didn't like the work.
Did you have to get up at 4 a.m?
No, I didn't, actually.
Okay.
I got
Isn't that a thing with bakeries?
Okay
like, don't people get up at like 3 a.m?
They do, but those are the bakers. I wasn't a baker. I was just a front of the house person.
Oh, yeah.
So I was the one that you would see behind the counter.
And just complain
and they'd
about
say, I don't really know what I want today.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you should get a cherry scone.
Right.
Because it's right in front of me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Or get whatever we have the most left of.
Right. Or take all of the quinamon.
Why was it hard why was it hard to find a job? Like, doesn't everybody find a job in 12 seconds?
That's what I thought too, yeah. And I was getting a lot of interviews, but I wasn't getting too many callbacks. Yeah. And I was just getting sick of it. I was like, I can't.
So you just went to work
just,
like a normal
around.
person. You got a job at a place.
Yeah. I was like, I can't just wait around. So I'm going to get a job. Maybe when I do some interviews, something will change in my voice because I won't sound desperate, maybe was what I was giving off. I don't know. But I was like, if I just have something with my day, then I can look at other things on the side. Yeah. So that's what I did. And for 5 months, I worked at this bakery. Ended up falling off of a ladder at one point, and I think that's what broke me.
Are you okay?
I was fine, but I have this gnarly scar on my leg.
What kind of climbing do you need to do in a bakery?
It was, it's a great bakery if you're in San Francisco, but it's...
Nobody eats carbs anymore.
Nobody does.
I'm just kidding. I'm sure plenty of people do.
You'd be surprised, though, because it was in that, like, super bougie area of San Francisco.
Oh, yeah,
and they
right.
had all the, like... And they had all types of, like, super rich people come in, and they loved their pastries.
Really? Did any guys go in there? Like, did guys buy pastries?
All the time.
Really?
All the time.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes.
Huh.
So it's a good mix of people who still like their carbs.
All right.
But there was this area where they couldn't store anything because there's zero storage in San Francisco.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
If you have any room in San Francisco, you're lucky.
Yeah.
So this place didn't have very much room to store all of their boxes and things that they needed for, like, pastries. So a lot of them were upstairs, and you had to, like, climb this ladder to get up there, to, like, crawl up there, grab this stuff, and then crawl back down.
How'd you fall off of it?
I don't know. I wasn't paying attention.
You gotta be careful.
I know. And then the next thing I know, I'm on the ground, and I'm just kind of looking around,
Good
like,
Lord.
what just happened to me?
Yeah.
And my manager comes back, and she's flipping out because I hurt myself, and she doesn't want me to sue her. Yeah. And I'm just sitting there going, there's a lot of blood.
There was blood?
Yeah, it was
What the hell's going on?
I fell off of a ladder.
I know, but you don't usually, like, just break something. You don't, like, break things open.
But I think that was the point where I was like, I need to get out of here. I'm going to break something.
That's probably a good hint.
Yeah.
I think bakeries would be incredibly stressful. The thing I think that always, like, would stress me out is when... Like, my girlfriend's name is Rachel. So whenever I don't really order her cakes, that would be kind of a weird relationship. But if there's, like, a birthday party or something, like, you're just nervous that they're going to spell Rachel wrong. Not that there's any way to spell Rachel other than how you would spell it. But, like, they're going to spell it wrong, and then somebody's going to get in trouble, and the whole party's ruined. Like, it just seems like there's too much pressure
There's a lot of pressure there. So, the nice thing is a lot of places can rewrite them really quickly. So if somebody screws up a name, like really? a lot of the time they'll like show you the cake, like, hey, this is what we're gonna give you. And if there's any spelling errors, you can say, so Rachel with an E.
Oh. Yeah, that happened to me once. They put an E in there. No, they put like an E. They put two E's in there somehow, like R-A-E. I'm like, what? Like, how do you even?
That's great.
Whatever.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I feel a lot less stressed about bakeries now.
Yeah, I think the most stressful situation I had there was this. I felt worse for the manager on shift than I did for the actual customer, but there was like this huge party and someone had ordered a bunch of pastries and they were fancy pastries too, like custom pastries. And somehow we had two big orders and somehow the orders got switched.
Oh boy.
So somebody got the wrong order.
Yeah.
And we didn't catch it and they didn't bring him back.
Oh boy.
So the other person that came in was like pissed that they had 170 pastries or like some insane amount.
Is there a lot of anger in the bakery? Like, it doesn't seem like a place you get super angry.
So much anger, but people deal with it. Like, it's fast, but it's so fast. Like, you can be really mad at somebody and you say, I'm pissed at you about this, and it's going to take me a while to get over it, but I have to go. And
Wow.
Yeah.
It just seems like, who cares? Like, oh, I wanted cherry scones, but they're raspberry scones. Like, oh, well.
Yeah. No, people get real cranky. I had a guy get mad at me because I had let his scone sell before I could grab it. Like, another front of house worker had grabbed the one scone that he wanted for somebody else before I could get to it. And
but that's how it works if you're in a line.
Yeah, and he said...
That's how all lines everywhere work.
Yeah, and he said, you let that person take that scone. That's the only thing I wanted. Wow. And I'm sitting there going, you are amongst a sea of pastries, my friend.
Yeah, you could have literally anything.
There are so many other... What's your option number 2? None.
No,
we're going. And he like dragged his girlfriend out, and I felt bad for her because you could see this like glint in her eyes just die.
Good Lord. It's like Game of Thrones in there.
It was intense.
How's it going on?
You get really good at telling people exactly what you need from them really fast, though.
It's probably one of those jobs where you learn a ton. Like when people go, I had my kid, like I wish I had my kid work at McDonald's, because you just learn how a bunch of shit works.
Totally.
And how shitty jobs can be. So when you get a normal job, you're like, oh, this is really cool.
Mm-hmm. But then you also respect the people who are in those shitty jobs way more.
I was like in high school a busboy for like one night, and I sucked at it. I hated it. I was terrible at it. And I just was a lifeguard for the rest of like my earning money in high school and college days. Like, way too hard.
It's the worst.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. I think everybody should go through that, just even for the empathy factor of it.
Yeah.
Because it takes a lot of work and it's stressful and you're on your feet all the time.
Yeah.
But you get really good at saying behind and people just moving out of your way.
Well, this is my this is why you're such a great story. So I make fun of millennials on my podcast, but then all the millennials I know are actually very cool. So usually people in your position have a story like, well, I spent half the summer like working for seriously, we'll interview people like, I spent half the summer working for my senator, and then the other half of my summer like helping people in Ecuador dig holes, because people in Ecuador can't dig holes, or like for whatever the problem is, and like they've never really just done a hard job because they're like, well, it's not fancy enough for them, like going to a bakery for like 10 hours a day and getting people's pastries, like they don't do. But the result is they don't like sit down and work.
Yeah.
But you're really ruining my narrative about millennials with your hardworking bakery story.
You wouldn't believe it, honestly, but there are a few millennials out there that actually work hard to get something.
I know, you're killing my Millennials Suck podcast idea, which has been my idea for a while. Like,
not all.
Ask a millennial if they suck. It sounds like your answer is no.
Not all of them. I'm not going to speak for everybody, but there are a few. There are a couple who haven't worked nearly as hard as you. Let me put it that way. They've had a much more privileged life. Yeah, and I'm not to say that I haven't had a privileged life either. I think to get to the position that I'm at in general, there was a little bit of privilege, but more hard work than privilege.
Yeah. You're running a company. You're a woman running a company in Silicon Valley, which isn't the normal thing. And you came from like a path where you weren't expected to end up in Wall Street or Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
You were going to be having babies in a paper factory kind of thing, or married to the guy who runs the paper factory, or whatever happens in small towns.
Yeah, all of that. All of that happens.
Right.
In small
so
towns.
It's actually really impressive that you're running your own company now.
Yeah, and terrifying. But I'm also kind of one of those...
You're not supposed to say that, by the way.
Oh, why?
You just haven't read the manual. Everyone's terrified by starting companies, and you're supposed to just kind of go, oh, it's fine.
What kind of human would I be?
I don't know. It's the Silicon Valley game. You actually fit...
I don't play that game.
You know who Ben Stein is, the author, actor?
Yes.
So he wrote an essay once. It was kind of interesting about people who end up in the West, like who ends up in California. Mm-hmm. And he kind of makes the... it's kind of tortured, but he makes the point that like the people who left England to come to the United States were the people who left England. Like that was the guys who weren't satisfied with England. They came here, and some of them were satisfied with where they were, and they stayed in Boston, New York. But some of them went further west to Minnesota, and then some people stayed. So wherever you come from are the people who weren't satisfied with England, weren't satisfied with the East Coast, stopped in the Midwest. And then people come out to the West, and then he argues when they ran in the Pacific Ocean and there was nowhere else to go, they went up into their minds, which is what Hollywood is in Southern California, what Silicon Valley is up in Northern California. So,
oh, interesting.
So
I haven't read that study.
It's not a study. It's like an essay where he's just mouthing off. I shouldn't have even mentioned it was him. But you've taken like the second half of that journey, right? You've left your home, you've come here, and you've created something.
And now what? Now I get to be in my head, which sounds even more terrifying.
Well, you run a podcast network.
Yeah.
Right? So you're creating...
Right.
Yeah. You're creating a bunch of pixels that people listen to. It changes their lives, right? It moves them. They learn something or they feel something or something happens, right?
Yeah. I hope so. Otherwise, I would be a failure. I would hate to be the one that's having more fun than the people or learning more than the people who are listening.
Yeah.
That to me is
failure.
Well,
you picked the hardest thing to do. Like starting a company is the hardest thing to do.
Sure. Yeah.
Like in life, it's pretty freaking hard.
Yeah, but once you fail once, you're kind of not really afraid of it
which is kind of funny. Like people from the rest of the world are like, what the hell are you... Like if you fail, it's like the worst thing they've ever heard of.
Oh, it hurts.
Yeah, it sucks. It's like,
but you'll survive. You'll live.
Sucks as much. And that's what happens. Like I have a friend who, like when he started a company a long time ago, he's like, yeah, the first time you kind of just step off into the abyss and you live, you're like, all right.
Don't know how I lived through that.
I guess it's okay.
Yeah.
And you do.
Yeah.
So how'd you get from the bakery? You survived it.
Yeah.
Literally survived it.
I did.
To
so one day while I was on my lunch break, I was scrolling through my Twitter feed because I am on Twitter. Yeah. I don't tweet very often because I do like to have actual experiences with people, and sometimes I get overwhelmed.
How's that going? The actual real world.
You know, in San Francisco, it's a little different because there are so many people on their phones that it's hard to have conversations without somebody referencing something on their phone.
Yeah.
But you get there. Yeah. Like, you find it every once in a while. Anyway, so I'm at lunch looking through my Twitter feed, and I see this ad for a studio assistant at a design company here called Mule with Mike Montero and Erica Hall. And I'd read their books and really admired them for what they had done and applied for it and got the job.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I survived that for 11 months before I could not do it anymore.
What was wrong with that job?
It was fine. No.
You're just an entrepreneur. You just need to be running your own show.
Well, I don't even know if that's the case. I think it was just the wrong environment for me. And I needed to learn that about myself. It was a tough learn, but it was also one of those positions where I was literally broken down until I didn't know who I was anymore.
Oh yeah.
And you know that feeling?
See, you're really ruining my. You're doing all the hard job. Like you see, you had a hard soul crushing job.
It was rough. It was very rough. They broke me down.
You're just drained at the end of the day, that kind of thing.
Yeah. To the point where you don't have any fight anymore.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Which hurts. That hurts so much. But I made it to 11 months, and then...
that's a big chunk of society, by the way.
Yeah.
If you wonder why people vote for Donald Trump, it's like don't vote for Donald Trump, by the way. But if you're wondering, like, how can someone possibly do it?
Yeah.
It's usually some form of that. Like, they are in a soul-crushing job that they see no way out of.
Yeah. Yeah, and I kind of looked at it and said, oh, my God, I could become a project manager, but the idea of becoming a project manager for this company scares the living daylights out of me.
Yeah.
And I think I would have a panic attack or some sort of meltdown or conniption. Something terrible is going to happen to me.
Yeah.
So, I guess, so I want to back up a second because I did that for like 8 months. And I think after 8 months, these guys had started this Design Details podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, I thought it was cool. It was a kind of cool idea.
Yeah.
Cool guys working on it. And it started to pick up, and people started wanting more, and they started getting sponsors. And it just kind of snowballed into this, like, once you start something, you can't stop it. You just got to keep going.
Yep.
You have to give the people what they want, because if you're in that kind of a position where you have that kind of power, you can't just withhold that. You have to give that to the people. You have to give it back.
Right.
So I sat down with them and said, this is really great. I hate my job. You should just let me work on editing and selling sponsorships for you and doing some of the back end stuff. And you can just focus on getting these great interviews with a lot of these designers and cool people in the city and outside of the city. So I picked that up and started doing that. And after 3 months, they said, hey, you're doing a great job, and you're to the point where we can start thinking about having somebody doing this full time. And we've got another podcast that wants to jump on with us, and they're selling sponsorships too, but they need help with that, and they need help with editing. And so you should just join us in this, and we can do it together. Yep. So we started really small. We started with Developer Tea, and we started with Design Details.
Mm-hmm. And what are these podcasts, like, roughly what's the nature of the podcast?
Design Details is all about interviewing cool people that are working on really cool projects. Mm-hmm. So they focus on designers, but the designers that they focus on are working on, it's very personal to Bryn and Brian. So it's designers that they are intrigued by themselves. And then Jonathan Cottrell, he's in Tennessee. He works for a company called Whiteboard, but he does a podcast 3 times a week for like 15 minutes each, I think. Mm-hmm. And he focuses more on how to balance work and life as a developer. And his is super cool too, because he kind of gets out of the development world and starts talking about thinking about hobbies that you have, or digging into reading or writing or looking at resumes, or all of that extra stuff that I think people forget. Yeah. Like, you know it in the back of your head, but you kind of forget it.
Yeah, right.
That sort of thing. Yeah. So, and it's really, when I started, it was really special to me, because when you live in the Midwest, it's hard to find a community that's really connected, because you feel so isolated most of the time. You're the only one who works on this one thing.
Oh, when you're working in tech and you're in...
Yeah.
Because when you're there, aren't there really tight communities of people?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Tight communities of people. But if you want to learn about like design or development, it's like it's very small, very small.
All right, folks, that's enough for 1 week. You guys don't have an hour to be lingering with me every week. You got a half hour, though, but you're busy people. We'll be back next week with part 2. It's an interesting conversation with Sarah Marie. It's funny, it reminds me of my conversation with Ben Chung, in which we were discussing his path as an entrepreneur and the struggles. And then all of a sudden, we were having a conversation about how his company had been acquired by Microsoft, and he was on to his next thing. I get that sense about the company that Sarah Marie is building, but we'll see. In any case, we will be back next time, part 2 of my conversation. This has been the Something About Your podcast. Thanks for listening.